My pleasure.
This meeting is being recorded.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Connect and Share for a Friday morning with Outdoors New South Wales and ACT. And as you know, I'm Laurie Moat, here to present another topic of discussion for you this morning, as well as an update from around the grounds, everything to do with the outdoors and what we can provide as information and resources that help you do your job more productively and grow. So firstly, may I acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in which we all meet today. I come from Darug country, and here we say Warami, which means welcome. And I'd love to pay my respects to the elders of past and also present, and work with all of our operators in connecting more with country so that we can continue to educate on the understanding of our land and also the connection of nature and what it does for health and well-being. Perfectly timed today that we're going to be talking about the Voice Referendum, and that is coming up on the 14th of October. So I've asked my own local member, my federal member, Julian Lesser, to join us, who's a huge advocate of us. He has been certainly voicing his support for a labour agreement for getting our workers from overseas timely and efficiently, but also a huge advocate for the voice as well. So I've asked him to join us this morning. Thank you so much, Julian, for being here, and I might just pass over to you so you can start the discussion on why this is important for where we are today.
Well, thanks so much, Laurie, and it's an honour and a privilege to be here with you. It's very hard to say no to you or to the good people of Outdoors New South Wales and ACT. You do wonderful work, and I look forward to the conclusion of the labour agreement, which I know is so important to you in terms of getting the staff that you need in the various businesses and activities that you're engaged with. Can I also join you in acknowledging both the Darug and the Guringai people, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging, and pay respects to all Indigenous people and all the and all the traditional owners of the lands on which we are meeting today. It's very special to be the member for Barara because in my community we have a special link between our community and the writing of the Australian Constitution. I'll come to that in a minute. But I must have been a very strange child, very different to the children that you have and many of the outdoor activities that you run. I wasn't that outdoorsy a sort of young kid. I was probably more bookish. And so when it came to the time of my 10th birthday, I didn't ask my parents for a BMX bike. I didn't ask them for a cricket bat or a football or anything like that. I asked them for a copy of the Australian Constitution. It's a very strange thing for a 10-year-old to ask for, but I was Nerdus Maximus, so there we go. One of the things that's amazing about our Constitution is that it was written in Australia by Australians and for Australian conditions. And one of the amazing things about it as well is that, unlike most constitutions around the world, which are often amended by votes of parliaments, our Constitution was voted on by Australians in a series of referenda in the 1890s. And the framers of the Constitution, the Federation Fathers, decided that if we were going to change the Constitution in the future, it should be a matter that is left to the Australian people. And so that's a really important thing about our Constitution. It's a privilege, it's also a responsibility, and it's the responsibility to get informed. And so I want to say to everyone at Outdoors New South Wales ACT today is I'm obviously voting yes. The way you're voting is a matter for you, but we all have the duty to get informed. And why I think our Constitution is special in the context of our own community here in the Barara electorate is that one of the places the Constitution was written in 1891 was on the Hawkesbury River. Sir Samuel Griffith, who became the first Chief Justice of Australia and who was at that point Premier of Queensland, had brought down the Queensland government's yacht, the Lucinda. And the 1891 convention met just before Easter, it met after Easter, and transport in those days wasn't easy, and so he thought he'd take a pleasure cruise, and so he asked Sir Edmund Barton, and who was the first Prime Minister, and a number of others to join him on the Hawkesbury, and there they drafted substantial parts of the Constitution over the Easter weekend. So it's a wonderful connection that my community has. The framers of the Constitution, in my view, did a pretty good job. And you know they did a good job because we are one of the 6 oldest continuous democracies in the world. We have a longer history of continuous democracy than Europe and most of Asia, and that's something we should be proud of. What the framers of the Constitution did in the 1890s was they got what they saw as the 6 constituent parts of the country and they brought them together. They were the 6 colonies, now the 6 states. But there was one constituent part of Australia that they didn't include in the discussions about federation, and that was our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. In fact, they viewed Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people very differently to the way in which we view them now. If we were writing a constitution today, we would absolutely make sure that in any convention there were spaces that were reserved for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to have their input into the constitution. In my view, this referendum, which has been asked for since the 1930s, when the great Yorta Yorta man William Cooper petitioned King George for recognition of his people in the Constitution. That while the Constitution's a great document, it's left out Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So in doing this, we are completing the Constitution. We're also doing something that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have asked us to do, because for the first time in the process that led up to the Uluru Statement from the Heart, and many of you will have heard about the Uluru Statement from the Heart, for the first time we actually asked Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people what they wanted when they were talking about constitutional recognition. And what they said is, we don't just want symbolic language. We don't want something that's like a mini Bill of Rights. What we wanted to be able to do is to be heard on the policies and laws that affect us. And so that's what the Uluru Statement is all about. It's a statement of aspiration for Aboriginal people for a voice in the Constitution. And from there, we as the Parliament have adopted this model of constitutional recognition for this referendum. And we, the Parliament, are asking you, the Australian people, for your permission to recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and set up the voice. I'd like to move now to the question that's actually going to appear on the ballot paper and the words in the Constitution, because I think you'll have heard that this referendum is about all sorts of things, but when you actually look at what's going to change in the Constitution, and when I walk you through that, you'll see it's actually about some very clear things. So I don't know if you've got a copy of the question or a copy of the amendment before you, if that's been prepared as part of this talk, but if you want to see what it looks like, you can go to voice.gov.au. That's voice.gov.au. It's not a political site, it's the government's official website that deals with the referendum. So the question that will be on the ballot paper when you go to vote on referendum day on the 14th of October, and you'll go to vote at the sort of place that you usually go to vote for at a federal election, the local community hall or the local school hall. Thank you, Laurie. That's exactly right. So just scroll down a little bit. You'll see here, voters will be asked to vote yes or no on a single question on the ballot paper. Just stop there, Laurie. A proposed law to alter the Constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. Do you approve this proposed alteration? And if you support what's being proposed, you write yes in English. And if you oppose it, you write no in English. That's all you do. You don't have to number anything. Don't do ticks and crosses. Just write yes if you support it or no if you oppose it. That's the best way to have your vote count. Now, Laurie, could you click on that thing that says just under the question there, read the referendum question and constitutional amendment. So if you just scroll down, that's the proposed law. And we'll just scroll down to the amendment. Now, some people will have told you that's perfect where we're there. Some people will have told you that this is the biggest change to the Constitution in our history. That's rubbish. I'm a very strong constitutional monarchist. I was involved in the 1999 Republic referendum on the no side. In that referendum, they proposed 69 changes to our Constitution. That was a very big change to the Constitution. By contrast, this is just one new section of the Constitution. Let's go through it now and let me explain what each bit means. So, in recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first people of Australia. That's the recognition part, the thing that's been asked for since the time of William Cooper, the thing that everybody agrees on that completes our Constitution in recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first people of Australia. 1. There shall be a body to be called the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. So what that paragraph is about is that there's a guarantee that going forward into the future, there will be a body that we can't abolish, we can reform, we can overhaul, we can change radically, we can adapt for the time, but we always have to have some sort of body, and that body's name is the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. So there's a guarantee of that, that's all. 2, this is the only guaranteed power that this body will have. And when you think about the body, I want you to think of it as like a committee, because it's just like a committee, like a P&C committee at your local school or your local football club, or your local progress association. It's a committee of citizens whose job it is to provide advice. So 2, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice may make representations to the Parliament and the Executive Government of the Commonwealth on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. That's a technical way of saying this voice committee can effectively write submissions to the federal Parliament, and the Executive Government of the Commonwealth is a fancy way of saying ministers, that's federal ministers and the federal public service, on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So what have we got? We've got a guarantee of a committee. We've basically got a guarantee that the one job the committee is guaranteed it can do is it can make submissions, make representations to the federal Parliament, the federal public service and federal ministers on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Now, you've heard a lot of stuff about we don't know the detail. The 3rd paragraph gives us the information about how we get the detail. It says the Parliament shall, subject to this Constitution, have powers to make laws with respect to matters relating to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice, including its composition, functions, powers and procedures. So the federal Parliament, if the referendum is successful, will introduce a piece of legislation that deals with who will serve on the voice, what functions it has, how we will deal with its representations, what powers it has and what procedures it has. That's all. So despite all of the noise about the end of the world that you're hearing about this from some of my friends on the no case, this is the only change that's happening to the Constitution. And this is all we're voting on. We're not voting on the Western Australian heritage laws. We're not voting on treaties or reparations or welcome to country or dot paintings or the rest of the Uluru Statement or whether the sun gets up in the morning. We are only voting on this change. That's all that changes if you vote yes. Let me say one other thing about detail. Some of my friends like to say on the other side of the debate that we don't know anything about how this is going to work. Actually, we know quite a bit about how this is going to work from statements of government policy in the yes case, from statements by the Minister for Indigenous Australians and statements elsewhere. So let me summarise for you today what we know about how this is going to work. So the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice will be a committee chosen of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. The voice will operate at the local, regional and national level. People serving on the national body will be chosen from the local and regional bodies. There'll be an equal number of men and women. There'll be spots reserved for young people. There'll be spots reserved for people from remote communities where we have most of the challenges that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people face. The body will be advisory only. It will not be a body that deals with running programs or providing funding. The body will have as its focus the closing the gap in education, employment, healthcare and housing. So we know quite a lot about what the body's going to do. We know quite a lot about how it's going to be chosen. We know there'll be term limits. That's the other thing. So I, as a member of Parliament, replaced a person who'd been in Parliament for 43 years. No one will serve on the voice for 43 years. There will be churn and turn of people there. So why do we need this voice? Why are Aboriginal people asking for this? Australia, by my view and by the view of most people, is the best country to live in on the planet. It really is. We're so lucky to be here. And we know how good and how livable it is because we perform so well in every imaginable social and economic indicator. We're always at the very top of the world. But when it comes to our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander brothers and sisters, outcomes for them are not the same as outcomes for the rest of the country. In fact, their outcomes make us look like one of the least livable places on earth. Those outcomes include things like the fact that an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person, their life expectancy is 8 years lower than the rest of the population. They're 2.5 times more likely to die by suicide than the rest of the population. 1 in 2 Aboriginal people lives at or below the poverty line. Some people like to say, oh, this is only about Aboriginal people in remote communities, but how can that be when 1 in 2 Aboriginal people live at or below the poverty line? 1 in 5 Aboriginal people live in housing that's inadequate in that it doesn't have a kitchen or sanitation. An Aboriginal woman in this state, in New South Wales, is 30 times more likely to be a victim of domestic violence than a non-Aboriginal woman. An Aboriginal boy is more likely to go to jail than to university. Doesn't matter whether you're in a remote community or whether you're in a city or a region. That's true. So we can't let these things continue. And the reason that I think this is so important is because this gap has in part been created because well-meaning public policymakers in Canberra, parliamentarians like myself and public servants, just do not have the information that they need to work out how you make better policy on the ground that adapts to the different ways and circumstances in which Aboriginal people live. And so we spend all this government money, and it's like throwing a dart at the board blindfolded because we're just not getting ground truthing of the policy ideas. And my experience in Indigenous Affairs is actually when you consult with Aboriginal people on the policies and laws that affect them, you get a better result. I want to give you a couple of examples of where we've had bad results, and I want to give you a couple of examples of where you get good results. So I chaired the, and then I'll take some questions because I will have talked to you for long enough. So
this is great, really keep going.
When I chaired the House of Representatives Indigenous Affairs Committee, we did an inquiry into food security in remote communities. Food is grown largely in the south of Australia, and it then gets transported to remote communities, many of which are in the north of Australia where it's very hot. Refrigeration is a real issue, both in terms of getting the food there, but also ensuring that you can keep the food as long as possible when it gets to the store so it doesn't go bad. One of the smart Canberra-based ideas was, why don't we have a grants program for these remote community stores where we'll send them some more fridges? That sounds a completely reasonable idea, because if you put food in a fridge, it lasts longer. We all know that. And that sounds like a good idea until you actually talk to people in remote communities. And they say, well, you can have every fridge that you want to in our community, but the truth is the electricity supply here is unreliable. So sending us a fridge is as good as sending us a cardboard box. That's an example of where we're not listening to Aboriginal people on the ground and making bad decisions. Another much more tragic example was told to me by one of the local volunteers on the Barara for Yes campaign here. She's a former official of the Commonwealth Department of Indigenous Affairs. She told me of a tragic story of the construction of housing. We know that housing is inadequate for Aboriginal people. We know that lots of money has been spent over the years. She told me the story of a housing project in a remote community where foundations were laid, people left their tools and then went back to their campsite and returned the next morning to see foundations ripped up and tools broken. And the contractors that came in to build the houses went to the local Indigenous elders and said, we've come in to build your houses, we've come in to make your lives better. Why have you destroyed the slabs we laid? Why have you destroyed our tools? And the Indigenous elders said, because you built these houses on our burial ground. Imagine if somebody came and put a housing project on Rookwood Cemetery, how we would feel. That's what happens when you don't listen to people. Let me give you an example now of how policy changes when you do listen to people and you get a better result. I recently visited the Victorian Aboriginal Community Controlled Health Service. The interesting thing that the people in the Community Controlled Health Service told me was that the incidence of breast cancer in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women is about the same as the incidence of breast cancer in the rest of the population. But unfortunately, the rate of death of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people from breast cancer is far, far higher than the rest of the population. And the reason for this is that Aboriginal women weren't getting screened. So the Victorian Aboriginal Community Controlled Health sector went out and listened to Aboriginal people. They did consultations around the state and said to people, why aren't you going to get breast screening? Firstly, Aboriginal women have issues around modesty, and they didn't like the idea of having to be screened in immodest fashion. Secondly, they regard hospitals, which are the place you go for screening, as places of trauma and death. They're not places they felt comfortable in or that the screenings were culturally appropriate. So in 12 of the communities, they commenced a project called the Beautiful Shawl Project. Indigenous women in those communities designed shawls that the women who were coming in to get screened could wear with Indigenous motifs that were relevant to their communities. And then instead of making people come to the breast cancer screening, they took the screening machines to the communities, and the women came out in droves. And now the rate of breast cancer screening among Aboriginal women has grown enormously in Victoria. That's a perfect example of how the voice will work. A problem is identified, consultation occurs, a new way of approaching the problem is put in place and better results come. That's all this is about. So, and I think you will know in your own lives what it is like when you're consulted about policies and laws that affect you, whether it's policies and laws at work, whether it's the local council talking to you about things, whether it's things in your school P&Cs that you might be involved in. Sometimes when you get consulted on things, people will do what you want them to do. Other times they'll reject your advice, and sometimes they'll cherry pick some of the advice. But the decision maker's decision is always better for having considered the advice of people directly affected by policy. And that's what this is all about. On the 14th of October, I'll be voting yes. I'll be voting yes because I think that this is a safe change. It's a change approved by 2 former Chief Justices of New South Wales, the former Chief Justice of the High Court of Australia, Robert French, and at least 4 retired High Court judges, the Law Council of Australia, most legal academics, the Solicitor General of the Commonwealth of Australia. It's a safe change. More importantly, it's a change Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have asked us for. Over 80% of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people support this change. And thirdly, I think it's a change that will be of benefit not just to Indigenous people, but to all Australians, because it means that we should be making better policies and laws about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and that should lead to better outcomes, and that should help us close the gap so that more Australians share in the bounty and good fortune that we have to live in this remarkable country. Thanks so much for your time, and I'm very happy to take questions.
Oh, beautifully said, Julian. Thank you so much. And what great examples to really bring it to life. I think, yeah, I'm getting a lot of nods there. So it's certainly backed up. Nice, did you want to talk to your comment that you just put in the chat?
Yeah, thank you. Julian, thank you so much for being here today. This is just so valuable. I suppose, yeah, I've just got a couple of questions. I'm sure I'm not the only one that has been engaging with our networks and friends and family over the past few weeks. And yeah, I've got a surprising number of people in my network who are in the no camp. And so I was just hoping that you might be able to assist with some of these arguments that are being brought up, and how to just respond respectfully and informatively as well. I've got another one here that I'll just pop in too. But if you could help me out, I'd really appreciate it.
Lisa, I'd love to answer those things. First thing I'm going to say to you is you should all organise a dinner party for tomorrow night and invite some friends around to home. Doesn't have to be a particularly flash dinner party, but invite some friends around, not the people who you know are voting no, and there's no way you can convince them of yes, but some of your friends who are saying, look, I'd like to vote yes, but they're the friends that's worthwhile asking. And I'd print out a copy of the amendment and the question and use it as a placemat at your dinner table, because you'll provoke a very good dinner party conversation. And it may be that this is the first time people have actually seen what is going to change. So I think that's one of the best things you can do. So let me just look in the chat here and take a question. So how do you respectfully respond to the slippery slope argument, a voice next, reparations, etc.? I think the first thing that we say is that there's only one thing that's on the ballot paper here today, and that is the voice. That's all that is being changed. It has nothing to do with reparations or treaty or, as I said, dot paintings or welcome to country or, you know, whether the sun comes up tomorrow. The no case in this referendum has adopted a Jackson Pollock approach to this. No offence to the connoisseurs of fine art who might be on this call. Jackson Pollock's very famous Blue Poles painting is in the National Gallery, and his job was just splatting the canvas with paint and see what stuck. So, you know, the no case has been going splat, you know, Western Australian heritage laws, splat dot painting, splat welcome to country, splat reparations. It's all just a side wind. There is nothing to stop Aboriginal people, if there is a no vote, pursuing reparations and treaty. And indeed, there are prominent no campaigners like Lydia Thorpe and Warren Mundine who are opposed to this in part because they want treaty rather than this. So there's only one question before us, and that is, do we want to recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people through the voice? The second question you've had is, how do you respectfully respond to the zero-sum game argument in the no camp? Diverting national resources, political sway to a population Minority means a loss everywhere. I'm really pleased you've asked this question, because this is the centre of the no cases argument. They're effectively saying that we are giving Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people some form of special treatment, or we're giving them an extra vote, or they're getting some benefit that other Australians aren't getting. That's what this is really about. I want to go back to the framers of the Constitution in answering this question. And I've said how good the framers of the Constitution were. No one's perfect, though. And they were people who, by the standard of their time, thought differently about the world to the way we do now. One of the things they put into the Constitution was a thing called the race power. The race power gives the federal parliament the power to make laws about the people of any race for whom it's deemed necessary to make special laws. At Federation, that excluded Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. But in 1967, at another referendum, 90% of Australians voted to allow the inclusion of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the race power. It's hard to imagine 90% of Australians voting in favour together of anything. I mean, we can't even agree on the time of day. Our friends in Queensland are still an hour behind us. I say an hour and 30 years. So, you know, I'll be kind. We're all friends here.
It's all right.
Since Federation...
You can not listen to that. Andrew's from Queensland. It's okay.
Since Federation, we have only ever made laws about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people on the basis of their race. We've never made laws for Greek Australians or Italian Australians or Chinese Australians or Indian Australians or Christian Australians or Jewish Australians or Sikh Australians or Hindu Australians. But we have made and do make special laws for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. They're the only people we make those special laws for. And the fruit of those special laws has been that gap that I spoke about, that it doesn't matter which side of politics is in power, it doesn't matter how much money is applied, that is a gap that is just not closing. So the idea that this referendum is suddenly putting race in the Constitution is wrong. It's been there from the beginning. The idea that we're giving Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people special treatment is wrong, because they're the only people we make laws about. And if you're going to make laws about people, just as if somebody was going to build a 40-storey apartment complex next to your single-storey house, you'd want to be consulted about it because you'd be affected by it. If you're an Aboriginal person and somebody's making laws about you, you deserve to be consulted about it. The other kind of related argument to this is somehow divisive. Oh my goodness, you know, people are having to make a choice at a ballot box. There's division. I'm the member for Barara. About 40% of people in my electorate vote for somebody else. I don't feel my community is particularly divided as a result of 40% of the electorate voting for somebody else. If you want an election result with no division, you can go to a place called North Korea. There they have, electoral results where there's sort of 90% of people voting the same way. The nature of democracy is people have different views. And, you know, that's a strength of our democracy. It's a strength that people can come and have their say. And what will happen on the 14th of October is people will have their say on this issue and then we will move on. And I hope we will move on to establishing the voice and helping to close the gap. I hope that helps.
Absolutely. Great question. And yes, Roo has put in a question there as well, Julian.
Yeah, there's a question about how would I respond to the voice isn't democratic and it make one race more important than others. I think I've just dealt with the second half of the question. In terms of not being democratic, so I think the first thing to say is we have democratic institutions in our Constitution. They are the Parliament, the House of Representatives and the Senate. They are elected by the Australian people, all the Australian people. And our job as parliamentarians is to make decisions on behalf of our communities, to make decisions to administer the government of the country. We're a decision-making body. But this is an advisory body. It's not a decision-making body. It's just a body to give us an opinion. That's all it is. And it's an opinion that we as the Parliament or ministers and public servants can accept, reject, or decide to cherry pick. The way the voice will be established is that people will form in local communities a local voice. Those local voices will feed into a regional voice, and from the regional voice, they will select people in each state to serve on the national voice. There are various bodies in our national life that have similar structures to this, where you've got local, regional, national structures. Our political parties have similar structures to this. The Country Women's Association has a similar structure where, you know, you go along to your local CWA branch, They elect people to the state body, and people from the state body elect people to the federal body. This is no different. So it's not undemocratic, and the precise way in which that will all be worked out will be worked out in legislation through the Parliament if the referendum is successful. One of the advantages of not specifying all of this in the Constitution and leaving it to Parliament is that if we get it wrong and it's not working, we can always amend and change it. If we say in the Constitution people will be chosen by this one way, then we have to have another referendum to change that. All we're asking in the referendum, the only power we are basically saying is there has to be a body. The body has to be able to provide representations, and that's it. Everything else is a matter that we as the Parliament can change from time to time.
Well said. Roo, was that helpful?
Yeah, very helpful. It's just I am shocked that some of the people I regularly meet with are voting no, and the arguments they put through to me, I just go like, oh, I just don't know how to answer them sometimes. But great, thank you, Julian.
Laurie, I don't know if you received, as one of my constituents, the little brochure I've sent out. Please feel free to share that with this group if that's helpful. And if people, I put out a brochure in my community that I've written myself about responding to some of the questions people have about the voice, which I hope is helpful. I just realised last night we hadn't put it on the website, and I'd love to. I think we'll put it on the website. We'll also put it on my social media so people can use it if that's helpful too in the weekend.
Yeah, wonderful. And I'll share it amongst our networks on our socials and website as well. Thank you so much. Any more questions for Julian while we've got such a wealth of knowledge with us today?
I've already been just Googled Julian and found that I wish I'd found some stuff before it would have helped, but there's plenty of stuff. Look on YouTube and comes up in Google searches.
Yeah, if you go to my website, there's it's Julian Lesser, LEESER.com.au, and there's a little tab on the thing called The Voice, and I've done 21 videos that are about 20 seconds each, just answering some of the questions people have about the voice. You might go, who am I? Why have I done all of this? I was the Shadow Attorney General and the Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians, and I resigned my position in order to campaign for this. Why did I campaign for this? Because I was involved in the original design of the voice proposal with Noel Pearson and Marcia Langton and Megan Davis many years before I became a parliamentarian. And I wanted to be able to campaign for something that I believed in. And in the political tradition in my party, frontbenchers are bound by the decisions of the party room and the shadow cabinet, but backbenchers are free to campaign on issues as they see fit. It's quite rare that somebody does what I've done and steps down, not about leadership, but about a principled issue. It probably hasn't happened for almost 50 years. But I just felt I couldn't do otherwise. And it's because I've been involved in these discussions since at least 2013-14 that I suppose I've got something to bring to the table by way of a bit of knowledge and thought. I've spent a lot of my misspent last decade thinking about this issue.
Well,
no, that's a credit to you, Julian. I must
absolutely.
say.
I'm glad you weren't out riding BMX bikes, otherwise you wouldn't have the knowledge you've got.
It had to come in handy one day, Roo.
Good. Yeah.
We can do that for you.
I also want to say to people, if there's anyone on the call here who's thinking of voting no, this is a matter about which reasonable people can disagree. And although I'm a yes voter, if you've got a question and you're unsure and you want to put it, I'm not going to bite your head off. Some of my best friends are no voters at the moment, and I think we need to, in approaching no voters, understand that it's okay to have doubts. But if you want to put the best argument to me that you heard that you're concerned about, this is a great opportunity to do so.
Yeah, great. Now, Julian, I've saved a bit of a hard question for you as last, and that is, what happens if it is a no vote? What's going to happen on the 15th of October when the country or nation does vote no in majority? I think I certainly fear that day, and I'm keen to hear from you if that does happen. What are we going to expect?
Well, Laurie, I think the first thing to say is that I am out every day. It's why I'm with you this morning talking to people about this issue, because I don't want to see Australia vote no. And can I say to you, if you feel particularly drawn to this issue and you want to do something about it, please get involved in your local Yes campaign, because I know we in Barara haven't filled all of the booth spots for referendum day yet, and that would be the same around the country. And so can I encourage you, because people do make up their mind as they're going in to vote, and if they've got an enthusiastic Yes supporter who's giving them some material, that can really help. And we've got the majority of people who are helping on our campaign have never been involved in politics before. They are community people who feel that this is the right thing to do. So you can either, if you live in my community, you can get in touch through my website. If you want to go elsewhere, you can go through yes23.com.au if you'd like to get involved. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think we just have to take a moment and listen to what people are saying and analyse the result. I obviously think it will be it will be a very sad day if Australians vote no, but we have to respect the decision of our fellow countrymen and women on the issue. But I don't think we should be in a hurry to rush to judge. I think there will be a lot of Indigenous people who will be feeling very sad, as well as non-Indigenous people, but particularly Indigenous people, and we just have to allow that be allowed to hear that hurt and hear that sadness for a bit, and let it rest and then reflect before we rush to the next thing. I think as a country, we need to recommit to the reconciliation process. This is the next logical step on the journey to reconciliation, and if it goes down, I think we need to regroup and think about what's next. I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer for you, but I think the Senior of Australian of the Year 2 years ago, a wonderful woman called Miriam Rose Ungama Bauman, an Indigenous elder, said that we need to engage in something she called Didiri, which means deep listening. And I think we need to do a period of deep listening after the referendum if it's unsuccessful.
Yeah. No, great answer. Thank you. And to Alan's point, I think Alan's just said, was this process came from the Aboriginal voice, and I think the Uluru Statement of the Heart, which is what you mentioned before, was really the setting of that, which was the Indigenous community coming together to write that to get to this point. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I'll just go back a bit, because it's a great question, Helen. So I mentioned William Cooper, the Yorta Yorta man in 1938. 1999, the same year we had the Republic referendum. People largely forget this now, but there was a second question put about whether we should change the preamble to the Constitution, among other things, to recognise Aboriginal people. That went down. And John Howard, that was under the Howard government, he had done that preamble with Aidan Ridgway, an Indigenous senator, and Les Murray, an Australian poet, but there wasn't very much consultation on it. Then he promised in the 2007 election that if he was elected, and he wasn't re-elected, to pursue constitutional recognition. And there were a series of processes, some parliamentary committees, one of which I co-chaired with Pat Dodson, an expert panel, and another thing called the Referendum Council. But Indigenous people had never properly been consulted about what they meant by constitutional recognition. So under the Referendum Council, a group was set up called the Uluru Dialogues Group. And they went around the country and conducted a series of dialogues all over the country in towns and cities and regional communities. And they asked Indigenous people, they gave them a whole range of different options about what constitutional recognition might look like. Symbolic recognition, Bill of Rights style provision, the voice, and there were a few other ideas, the recognition of languages and so on. And almost universally, people said, we want the voice. And those those dialogues that occurred around the country was the largest consultation of Indigenous people ever on constitutional recognition. And those dialogues resulted in the Uluru Statement, which was signed up to by nearly everyone. There was a small group of people, including Lydia Thorpe, who was there, who walked out and didn't sign it. But overwhelmingly, Indigenous Australians supported that. And the polls that have occurred on the issue since that time of Indigenous Australians indicate that support among Indigenous Australians is over 80% for this. Now, of course, as in our own families, as in our own communities, there are people with different views. I mean, why should we expect Indigenous people all to have 100% the same view when we ourselves don't all agree on absolutely everything? So there are a couple of Indigenous people who are opposed to this, but the overwhelming majority of Indigenous people, the overwhelming Indigenous leadership, the polls of 80% or more indicate that this is supported by Indigenous people, and the way in which this is rolled out, the way in which I've described it working, is the result in part of consultations that have occurred subsequent to Uluru through a process called the Kalma-Langton report, which you might have heard of, which is a sort of a process to co-design what the voice might look like, and a process run by a thing called the Referendum Working Group, which was set up by the present government to review Kalma-Langton and also to review what was happening in the referendum. And they have helped design some of those principles that I outlined to you earlier, like, you know, equal representation of men and women and spots for people in remote communities and term limits, etc.
Okay, all right, sounds good. Yeah, I mean, I've run programs for Aboriginal communities in the past and learned that if you want it to succeed, you've got to listen to what they want first, then you can get it to work. Yeah, that was partly what was driving my question.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Alan.
Mm.
Wonderful. Okay. Any last questions, or we'll let Julian get on to his massive workload that he's got ahead of him today.
I'm going back to pre-poll. I'm going to convince last-minute voters. So
awesome. We're right behind you. So thank you so much, Julian, again, for your time and energy and your passion for this. I think I speak on behalf of a majority of our outdoor industry that we understand that connection to country is crucial to our jobs, our work, and connecting more people to see that is certainly that we all advocate for. So thank you.
Thanks, Laurie. We'd love to see you on a booth on referendum day.
I will be here. Okay. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. So, guys, we'll get back into our other topics. And as I put on my life vest for today, because it is wear your life jacket to work, and I've got my daughters and it doesn't fit me. So we are wearing our life jackets. Dylan, did you want to talk to what day it is today and why we have wear your life jacket to work day?
Yeah, thank you. It's Boating Safety Week across Australia this week, and today is the last day of Boating Safety Week, and it's Wear Your Life Jacket to Work Day to increase messages around boating safety. And obviously we're big supporters of that as Paddle and Portage Valley Outdoors, but also the Festival of Canoe and Kayak. And I hope to see you all at the event next year. If you've not checked that out, go check out the website. But if you submit a photo to the Festival of Canoe and Kayak online, do all the tagging, check out the Facebook page or Instagram, you can go into the running to win a limited edition festival hat and also one of our beer cozies, which I don't have. So yes, help get out that messaging and increase boating safety around Australia.
Brilliant. Love your work. Thank you so much for bringing our attention to that, because it's a great message. So other things that happened this week, guys, I'll run you through. We actually had our industry strategy day, and thank you to all the members that did partake in that event, as well as some non-members. It was a great day where we really talked about some of the key topics that we need to consider in the future of our industry, and we're busy consolidating all that feedback at the moment, and we'll actually send that out to you all, those who attended, to get some additional content around some of the areas we didn't quite get to the depth of. So thank you again to everyone for that attendance. We also had our annual general meeting where we have 3 new board members, and welcome to one of our board members today, Dylan. So we have 9 directors in total, and we had Catherine Shaw, Peter Kent and Dylan join our board for the next 3 years. So congratulations, guys. We also handed down annual report for this year, which had some great results, certainly fiscally and also in activity and awareness. And now it sits beside our annual report library, of which are all on your membership portal, where you can download and look at it in depth. I also attended the Visitor Economy Forum yesterday, put on by Destination New South Wales, which was certainly a well-attended event, over 550 people in attendance at that event. And it was pleasing to see that the CEO, Steve Cox of Destination New South Wales, in his second opening slide, showcased our industry beautifully with an abseil in the Blue Mountains. So again, just putting outdoors on the radar of everything that happens to do with tourism and Destination New South Wales. He did talk to the growth potential of the industry. So if you are in the adventure tourism area, there is some great optimism about the future and growth of the industry, and that was highlighted several times throughout the event. Certainly the growth is gaining momentum to really surpass the 2019 levels, which at the moment on an expenditure basis we have exceeded, but certainly in visitor numbers we haven't quite got there as yet. The other things that I wanted to highlight to you is the move to experience economy. And this is a drive from the new minister, and looking at arts, culture, nightlife, the 24-hour economy, but also looking at everything we do as part of the experience economy. So that includes our adventures and the experience that they give people. Our beautiful Macrindle, which we know and love, who have been a great supporter of our industry and came to our event in Lennox Head, were also one of the key notes at this event. So Ashley did a great job in reaffirming some of the content that you guys have already seen at the Lennox Head event, but she did go into a little bit more around the current vacancy stress that is putting on the whole tourism industry. And as you can see there, we're sort of in the arts and recreation area and still at 23% vacancies across the board. So emphasising why we at Outdoors New South Wales and ACT are doing a lot of work in the careers area, but the training and skills area to get more workforce in. And as you heard from Julian, been talking to him about supporting a labour agreement for outdoors, the outdoor industry. She also highlighted that consumer trend, which was touched on by Mark Macrindle at our event, but I think this one needs to be emphasised, that as businesses and people that are interacting with visitors, we're moving into a phase that they are wanting more from their experience that is more predicted to their needs. So if you look at yesterday, we're starting to customise the offering for them. Today, we're personalising that offer, and we can see that in how our Google feeds and our Facebook feeds come. But really where we need to go as businesses and interacting with customers is predicting their needs and trying to really tap into what they need before they know that they have it as a need. The buying experience and focusing in on not just price is a considerable area that Ashley also emphasised, particularly around recommendations from friends and family, but also those that talk about the brands that add to the triple bottom line, and looking at environmental concerns is still a key point that people look for. Tourism Australia discussed their beautiful research, which I haven't delved into in depth, but I will share that with the members. Really great outcome of this research was where certain visitors matched with other experiences that they have. And the one I wanted to highlight to you is that they said the travellers who visit Australia for major events are more probable in engaging in adventure tourism experiences. So if you haven't got events on your radar to tap into the experiences that you have, whether it's through co-marketing or just understanding some websites that you can look at to drag some visitors to your product and potentially partner with them, I'd stress that that's probably a great area to go, because 40% of all people that visit a major events are really interested in adventure tourism, and particularly water sports, rafting and kayaking as a great example. We also had a gentleman from Google that talked about AI and the work that AI can do for businesses, not only just in the front office, but also in the back office. And although I think he mesmerized the whole audience in the potential, there will be certain opportunities as AI becomes more ingrained and integrated in the tools that you use to save time and resources on the things that you can do to connect better with customers. I attended a couple of concurrent sessions. The first one I attended was the LGBTQIA+, and that was understanding about some of the areas that this market looks for when they're traveling, and certainly a huge opportunity for the adventure tourism market as well. The key takeouts for me were some great tips around use of gender and also pronouns. There is a lot of bias that still exists in today's society, and very easy people can refer to. Example that I gave was a couple saying Mr. and Mrs. and not really understanding their clients before they actually use pronouns and address their clientele, which can influence how they feel in your environment, and also the referrals that you get from clientele of this sector. So some great takeaways. I think we'll have some more discussions with that, liaising with some of these speakers about coming on and talking to you in a Connect and Share in the future. And the second one there was the nature-based assets. And you guys have already had a preview of this as well, which they presented rail trails. So they presented at our Lennox Head event. So you're well across the magnificent results of the rail trail. And the last one I attended, where actually Dylan was actually in the panel there, which was great to see, was around health and wellbeing and maximising wellness tourism. So they talked about the tourism side of wellness being $639 billion worth in Australia, and certainly the trends are, look at that top one there, outdoor physical fitness. So a great opportunity for us to tap into that wellness and get more people looking at integrating wellness with their tourism experiences, because as they say, there's about 86 of people that actually combine it with their primary purpose of travel. Only 14% actually go and do a wellness tourism experience on its own, but there's a huge market out there that try to build it in to their tourism offer. And you can see our fabulous board member there presenting on that. So the submissions that we've got coming up, there is a few open. If you're interested in the Montague Island Plan of Management, that's open till the 20th of November. There's also the Tomaree Coastal Walk for those that are interested in partnering with national parks for an eco pass license to utilise this coastal walk for tours. Please get in touch with Kyle and put your interest forward. And the ANZCO code review will be open from next week. This is the third and final ANZCO code review. I'm going to get on my soapbox quickly as I did last week, but please, guys, if you have not responded to any other ANZCO code review, I urge you to do it to this one, because this is your final opportunity to really have your say about how our industry is not recognised in the ANZCO code. And this is limiting what we can do with our labour agreement with the federal government as well. Dylan, you got a question on that one?
Yeah, does Outdoors New South Wales have a template response for this and recommended answers that they've circulated with members?
Absolutely. It's in our blog. It'll be, I think, the second article in, and please feel free to cut and paste and send under your own letterhead. Thank you for asking that question. The other feedback that I'm trying to get done today is on the IR bill. So I'm working with the senators on this one to ensure that they understand where the outdoor industry will struggle with some of the recommendations in the IR bill. There are some recommendations in there that are going to be great for employees, but certainly there's some that will limit us as far as casual employment goes. So if you think you're going to be affected by this, I'm really keen to hear from you on your own case study so I can build it in. And I won't go through all of the depth of the PowerPoint, but this will be in your membership portal if you want to look at all the different things that come out of the IR bill and what may affect you. And just the final note here is the events coming up. We've got the Australian Regional Tourism Convention in Newcastle next week. That's on the 10th to the 12th of October. I'll certainly give you some feedback from that event if you can't make it. And the Visit Canberra Tourism Industry Briefing will be held on October 26th at the National Film and Archive. That should be a great event. Unfortunately, I am presenting to 800 careers advisors that day, so I won't be there, but hopefully if one of you are going, we'd love to hear how that goes. And also Canberra Tourism are asking any of their operators interested in entering into the Indian market to talk to them about that, because they've got some initiatives coming up that they would like to engage the industry on. And the final one there is we've got a Canberra members meetup on the 27th of November that will be held at 5 p.m. and that's a great opportunity to come and chat to us if you're in Canberra about all things happening there, and we can feed through to you what is being done on your behalf from Outdoors New South Wales and ACT. Next week, we have our Connect and Share is all about action for good. And the 20th, we're going to be talking about the considerations that businesses and organisations in the outdoor industry need to consider in 2024. And our last Connect and Share for the year will be held on the 8th of December. That's coming up quicker than we like, I'm sure. But on that note, that is everything that I have for you today. So I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you so much for joining us for this great session. And I look forward to seeing you all at the next event. Have a great day, everyone.